Pizza Hut has been one of the best and worst jobs I've ever had. I'll start with the reasons why it's been good before jumping right into the bad stuff. It's going to make explaining what happened to me last night a lot easier if you know a little backstory. For a business that constantly reminds me how cheap it is, it pays me well enough as assistant manager. The work is typically repetitive and simple, and my days there usually melt together as it's more or less the same routine every day. Deal with customers. Make the pizzas and wings. Call the Pepsi company and complain our order is late for the third time in a row. There's the odd time when things get tense, we get angry/complaining customers every few days, but every workplace that deals with customer service gets those. Thankfully, it never usually takes more than a free pizza or a credit on their next order to make them happy again. For the past 11 months, I have been the restaurant's main closer. My shifts never change from 4 to 11 or 4 to 12 on Fridays and Saturdays. Once in a while, I'll get scheduled for a 10 to 6 or 11 to 7 shift if one of our openers is sick. But that's pretty rare. However, it does happen. Since I live in such a small town, my Pizza Hut only deals with takeout and delivery orders. There's no dine-in area at all except a couple bar tables and stools by the main entrance for people to wait for their order. The front lobby of the restaurant is tiny and the kitchen is no exception. The entire back area is pretty much one big room, with a little area behind a wall in the back that doubles as the prep area and office. There is no break room or employee bathroom. We do have one bathroom at the front for customers, right next to the pop cooler by the entrance to the kitchen. Now that you know a little about how the restaurant looks and runs, I'll move on to why it isn't a good place to work at the best of times. First off, I'm one of the only 5 people that work there. My boss and 2 of my other employees are contract workers from India, so English isn't their first language. They never talk in English when it's just me and them, so I'm always a little out of the loop. My other coworker works only part-time since she's still in high school. So with her, they're only a few hours a week. I spend a majority of my time working without talking too much to my other coworkers. Can get pretty lonely. Now a little about me. I just turned 20. I'm a smaller female and I live about 10 minutes away from work. That's 10 minutes walking one way. I don't have my license or a car. This typically doesn't bother me, but it does get kind of scary when I'm walking home in the dark after midnight. Thankfully, the walk to my house is in a pretty good part of town. I've yet to run into any real issues. Other than the language barrier between me and most of my coworkers, the only real problem comes from the night shifts. Since one person is fully capable of doing all the closing duties, I am left there by myself from 8 p.m. onwards. This means I have to answer the phones, help the customers, and make all the orders. It's not usually busy, so I never have a problem with that, unless there's the odd time where I get 4 or 5 orders at once. But I am really fast at making pizzas. I can usually get them made and in the oven within a minute and a half of the order being taken. The real problem with being alone on closing shifts explains it within this very sentence. I'm there all alone. It can be kind of spooky sometimes, if there's someone weird that comes in. Anyone could rob me or hurt me and there would be no one there to help. I've talked to my boss about my concerns, but he always dismisses me saying, "I'm a phone call away if you need help. We should not have to pay a second person to do your job." Jerk. Last night, I worked my usual close. Since it was Sunday, I only had to stay until 11, but it felt like I was there for hours more. Last night, my fears of what would happen when I was alone came true. My shift went normally for half the day. By the time 8 o'clock rolled around, I had said goodbye to my morning crew and had already started on the closing checklist. Weird stuff started happening around 9:30. I was making dough in the back, taking my time with it since there was not much else to do. I heard the beep-beep of the doorbell, and automatically I spun around, looking up at the TV displaying real-time footage of the front lobby. I stared at it for a few seconds, confused. The front was empty, and I could not see anyone out the windows outside. Convinced I had imagined it, I carried on with my dough. I greased and oiled 5 more pans, finishing the stack. I stacked them on top of each other and picked them up, turning around to check the camera again before I carried the dough into the walk-in cooler. My heart leaped painfully in my chest and I fumbled with the stack, nearly dropping them all on the floor. A man was standing in the lobby, peering into the kitchen. At once I set the pans down, wiping my hands on my apron before I ran out to greet him. He had shocked me, but I got over it quickly. I figured he must have been standing in the blind spot last time I checked the camera, the spot where I used to hide when taking extra breaks so my boss couldn't see what I was doing. "Hi there," I called out as I walked quickly over. "Sorry about that. I didn't see you come in. What would you like to order?" "I didn't see you come in." The man repeated my words. "I didn't see you come in." I stood still for a second, not knowing what to say. I was getting a really bad vibe from this guy, and as he spoke it got worse. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself with little success that I was being silly. The man looked average enough despite being very dirty. He was very tall and looked older than my dad, but he was dressed strangely. He was wearing a shiny light blue dress shirt tucked into gray-stained sweatpants. His sweatpants were tucked into his socks. His hair was greasy and combed to the side. His pockets were stuffed with what appeared to be all the mints I had in the jar near the menus. He smelled like he hadn't had a shower in weeks. "Can I take your order?" I asked again, but my voice lacked questioning. It sounded more like a timid statement, and I wondered what this guy's problem was. It took a long time, but finally he ordered a small pepperoni pizza with 8 boneless wings. I rang his order in quickly, happy he had finally said something. I couldn't help notice the way his mouth moved when he talked. It went just straight up and down like a doll. He didn't have any teeth and his breath nearly made me gag. "I'll have your order ready in 10 minutes, I said, placing his change on the table. I thanked him again and walked into the kitchen, wishing there was a door instead of an empty frame leading into the kitchen. I didn't want him to get curious and look in again. I went into the walk-in, grabbing a small pan to make his pizza. Before I got started on it, I checked the camera again, feeling a little better when I saw the man sitting at the bar table reading what looked like a menu from the front counter. Convinced he was just not all there and most likely homeless, I ignored my gut feeling that something was wrong and prepared his order. I had the pizza in the oven in under 30 seconds. I dropped his wings in a basket and set the timer on the fryer, 6 minutes to kill before they're ready. I took this as an opportunity to check my phone. I picked it up just in time. I was receiving a call from my friend Lana. "Hey," I said into the phone. "You caught me just as I'm taking a few minutes break. What's up? Hurry up and be done with work." Lana cried, sounding irritated. "I'm so bored." "1 more hour," I said after glancing at the clock. 10 p.m. I was startled by this. It felt like I had just looked at the clock. Half an hour had gone by since the man had come in. "Lana, you should walk over and pick me up," I said in a low voice. "There's this weirdo here and he's giving me the creeps." "Are you alone again?" Lana asked, sounding concerned. "Yeah," I mumbled into the phone. I tried to talk to my boss about it again, but he never does anything. "Anyways, I'll see you in a bit." I hung up the phone just as the fryer timer started to beep. The wings were done. I threw my phone in my bag and walked around the corner to the main part of the kitchen. I sauced the wings and cut the pizza, carrying the order to the front while looking forward to seeing the man leave. I looked around and felt my knees grow weak again. The front was empty. The stool the man had been sitting on was jutted out. The menu he was reading was on the ground. This completely freaked me out. I hadn't heard the doorbell, so he couldn't have left. My eyes drifted over to the bathroom door. The handles button was horizontal, meaning it was locked from the inside. This made me feel a little better. He was just in the bathroom, there's nothing wrong with that. I stood at the till, aimlessly looking through stuff as I waited for him to come out so I could give him his order. I looked down at the bottom of the screen at the time. 10:15 p.m. 10:21 p.m. 10:34 p.m. He had been in there for a good half hour before I mustered the courage to knock on the door. "Everything all right in there?" I called out. At once I could hear shuffling, as if I had startled him. I backed up, preparing for him to come out. The shuffling then stopped, but he still didn't open the door. I walked closer again, raising my fist to bang on the door again when I heard a click. The door had unlocked. 10:40 p.m. I was at a loss for what to do. I had grown very paranoid and I now knew something was wrong. But at the same time I couldn't just stand there and wait for something to happen. It was 20 minutes to close and I still had a few things to do. I braced myself to open the door and deal with it when I heard him whispering, "One more hour. One more hour." I jumped back like I had been burned. He was recycling my words again, from earlier when I was on the phone. But I was in the back of the kitchen behind the wall. There's no way he could have heard me, unless he had crept back there and listened in. I backed away from the door and grabbed the phone, dialing my boss's number. My hands shook as I struggled to press the buttons. Bright lights suddenly distracted me, and I looked up to see a car pulling into the parking lot. I thanked my lucky stars as two people got out and walked towards the restaurant, holding hands. However, seconds before they could open the door, the bathroom door creaked open. My heart pounded as I looked over, not sure what I should prepare myself to see. The man looked the same as before,